last week on stream we did a little study session about eyes. Looking at my last characters, I sort of saw that I think the eyes are sort of my weakness right now. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to research a little bit more about the anatomy and how to sculpt it and all that. And then we wanted to sculpt them ourselves to maybe even develop a new workflow. And this video is basically a cut of all the things that might be helpful to you as well, so that, you know, not only I can benefit from all the things that I've learned. I've used this eye model for quite a while, and I think it overstayed its welcome. The eyeball itself is so white, and there's no gradient. Eyeballs are generally more yellowish, and they also have blood vessels going into the middle or into the iris. So you would see that on the side, which would tint the side or the corners of the eye slightly reddish. You don't have that here. Oh, that's another thing. The eyes look very flat. They don't have a lot of contrast. Everything is sort of in the same gray value. The eyes lack a little bit of depth, let's say. Inherently, humans have a slight outward rotations of their irises. I don't exactly know why, but generally they have like a slight 1 or 2% or 2-degree outward rotation of their eyeballs. So the irises point in 2 different directions. For some people you can see it more, for some people you can see it less. But I think for her it's too much. So what I usually do for these kinds of characters, I use an empty and then I focus the irises on that empty so they always look at the same spot. So I don't have to kind of guess how I need to place the eyes to make them look like they look at the camera, for example. I think for this one I pulled the empty quite far back. Maybe I pulled it too far back so it looks weird, you know. So if you compare these two, I think what you can say is that the iris is bigger. I think what could also be is that the eye itself is smaller and the makeup just makes it look bigger. It's always hard to sort of gauge what the eye size actually is without makeup, if a character has makeup and you don't know what they look like without it. So I wanted to create them myself so I can sort of explore the anatomy of the eyes a little bit more. But then Lego graciously gave me his eye model. The eye iris looks very, very detailed. The eye hole is made out of a cylinder and the iris is made out of like a half sphere. Let's now apply this eye to the Caitlyn model and just see what it looks like afterwards. You can see the difference is quite big. Maybe I'm just not used to it, but they look quite big now. So as you can see, that's what we did yesterday. And the question that I had, or the thing that kind of tripped me up is comparing these eyes to these eyes. Well, first of all, you can see he looks like he's been smoking a lot, okay? Why is that? Because his irises look huge compared to his. So the first question that I had was basically like, wait, the eyes are supposed to be this big. How can these be bigger than these ones? But then today I realized, or I learned that when you talk about eye width, and you generally say for characters 5 eyes next to each other equal the head width, and 1 eye in between the two equal, I guess, the correct size between the two, you know? It never really fit because the eyes down here are smaller than here, and I couldn't really get them quite right when it comes to the size. I couldn't make them smaller than this. And the reason for that was because the eyeballs are actually smaller than the eyelids. The eyelids are bigger than the eyeballs. The eyeballs are roughly, I think, 6 to 7 eyeballs next to each other equal the head width, which of course then makes sense why the eyelids or why the eyes can be smaller. And then the space between the eyelids would be something more like 1.5, 1.25 or 1.5 eyeballs in between them. Older people make it easier for you to see the different parts of the face. Like, oh, we have like fat underneath the eye here. We can see the fat is sort of falling, or it gets saggy, so it kind of covers the eyes more. These finer details are a little bit harder to see in younger people because the skin is more stiff and more smooth. So it's harder to see the small details. So it's always good to have an older person that you can, for example, use as reference, or that you use as reference, and then a younger person to compare the two and how they change. The features that you can see very clearly in this one, how they are still in this one, but I guess a little bit different. If you smile, because there's a muscle that's connecting to the mouth that is right here and goes to the cheekbone, and then it kind of pulls everything up, you know, like this. All the tissue and all the fat that is right here gets pushed together and pushed up, which means that oftentimes your lower eyelids get kind of pushed up a little bit, especially if you're younger. You can see here for her it's not too much. Usually the lower eyelid only really touches the iris rather than covering it. So you can see, even just looking at eyes, you can see expressions like smiling. What you can also see with her is the cheekbone right here. The part right here is fat, and then down here you can see the cheekbone. That's where you can see the very clear distinction between cheekbone and fat right here. Oh, another thing that I learned is that the fat pads actually get smaller. They shrink as you get older, which is why oftentimes for older people, you can really see the eye holes. So what I've done before always is I've just, yesterday, for example, I just did this to add the eyeball. The problem that I now see with this technique is that I would like to begin by knowing that they're the right size without having to change them afterwards, which I can't really guarantee with this technique. So I would probably rather immediately add spheres instead of like sculpting them. So we're gonna just grab the eyes again. Oh, we don't need mirror right now. We need the array modifier. Let's set it to 7. I think he has quite small eyes if I see that right. Should be as wide as the widest part of the head. Right here. Scale it. There you go. It looks like his eyes are quite far out, so we can probably place it further forward. Somewhere over here. What I did before, I used this technique before. I filled all of this up with volume. So we covered the eyeball, and then I just remove it again to create the actual eye. Let's fill the rest. Yeah, it feels like this technique is better. Like, I don't know, it just feels like you have one piece you can sort of anchor yourself on. The thing that you know is right, which you can then use to put everything, I guess, on. The anchor of the sculpt, basically. Let's compare these 2 or 3 to the ones from yesterday. We have number 1. Felt kind of janky. I think this one is actually the best one out of the 3. Still, I struggled with the size. Especially, I think these ones look the best from the 3 that I've made today. Probably because I spent the most time on them. Then you have this one here. I think out of the 3, I think this one looks the worst. Even though this one is very, very, very rough too. The eyes are way too big. The irises, look at them. They look like they're basically just like the eyeballs are just black. Comparing that to this one, for example. With a little bit more practice and all that, I think we can come to a pretty good conclusion for the eyes.